Somewhere in the darkness beyond the 9th month of 2026, a machine older than most of the people who study it will cross a line that nothing built by human hands has ever crossed. Not a border on a map. Not a boundary drawn by a country or a treaty, a boundary drawn by physics itself. On November 18, 2026, at 16 minutes and 12 seconds past 2 in the morning Pacific time, Voyager 1 will become the first object our species has ever sent far enough away that light itself needs a full day to catch up to it. One light day. 24 hours traveling at the fastest speed anything in this universe is permitted to move, just to cross the gap between that spacecraft and the room you're sitting in right now. Say that out loud and it still doesn't quite land. So let's make it land. Light is fast. Absurdly fast. It crosses the distance from the sun to your eyes in about 8 minutes. It circles the Earth roughly 7.5 times in a single second. When you look up at the moon, you're seeing it as it was a little over a second ago. When you look at the sun, you're seeing 8 minutes into the past. These numbers are so large, they stop feeling like numbers and start feeling like abstractions, decorative facts you nod at and forget. But stretch that same speed of light out to a full day of continuous travel, and the number it produces is almost obscene. Roughly 16 billion miles. Not thousand, not million. Billion with a B, and it isn't rounding error. It's the literal distance a beam of light covers if you let it run uninterrupted for 24 straight hours. And in a matter of months, that is exactly how far away one of our machines will be. To understand why this moment matters and why it's not just a novelty milestone for astronomy nerds to circle on a calendar, you have to understand what it actually costs to talk to something that far away. Right now in 2026, a signal sent from Voyager 1 already takes over 22 hours to arrive on Earth, not 22 minutes, hours. If an engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory sends a single command up to the spacecraft today, they will not know whether it worked until sometime tomorrow. And if that command fails, if something goes wrong, if the spacecraft needs a follow-up instruction to correct course, that correction takes another full day to arrive and another full day for the confirmation to come back. A conversation that would take you half a second with the person sitting across from you takes the Voyager team the better part of a week. Now, push that number just a little further past 22 hours, past 23, until it finally formally crosses 24. That's the moment. That's what November 18th actually represents. Not a bigger distance in some abstract sense, but the crossing of a very specific, very human threshold, the point where communicating with something we built becomes, for the first time in the history of our species, a full calendar day out of sync with our own lives. Send a message Monday morning, and by the time the reply comes back, it's Wednesday. 2 entire days have passed on Earth to complete a single exchange with a machine the size of a small car. Let's talk about how something so far away, so old, so quietly stubborn ever got here in the first place. Voyager 1 launched from Kennedy Space Center in September of 1977. The mission was never designed for this. Nobody at JPL in 977 sat down and planned for a spacecraft that would still be transmitting data across 16 billion miles nearly half a century later. The plan was modest, almost to the point of being timid. Fly past Jupiter, fly past Saturn, take pictures nobody had ever taken before, collect a handful of years of data, and then quietly go dark. 4 years of operational life, maybe 5 if the hardware held up better than expected. NASA engineers in the late 70s were planning a retirement party for this mission sometime around 1982. That party never happened because the spacecraft simply refused to stop working. It swept past Jupiter in 1979, sending home the first genuinely close photographs of that planet's swirling storms that any human being had ever seen. It reached Saturn in 1980 using the planet's own gravity like a slingshot to fling itself further outward, faster, deeper, into the solar system's outer reaches than any engineer's original mission plan required. And then instead of drifting into silence the way it was supposed to, it just kept going, kept transmitting, kept working on hardware that by any reasonable modern standard should have failed decades ago. In 2012, 35 years after launch, Voyager 1 crossed the heliopause, the invisible boundary where the sun's constant outward stream of particles finally loses its fight against the pressure of interstellar space pushing back in from the other side. It became the first human-made object to leave the protective bubble that contains our entire solar system and step into the space between stars. And still, it kept transmitting. Still, 14 years after that crossing, it keeps talking to us, sending back a thin, faint signal from a place no other instrument humanity has ever built has managed to reach. That signal is what makes November 18th matter, because distance alone is just a number. What makes this moment different is that the spacecraft producing that number is still alive, still working, still sending home real data about a region of the universe that has never had a working scientific instrument inside it before. If Voyager 1 had gone silent in 1990 or 2005 or even 2015, this milestone would just be a line on a trajectory chart, a mathematical inevitability nobody was around to actually witness. Instead, in a matter of months, a machine we built during the Ford administration is going to cross the 1 light day threshold, while it is still against every reasonable expectation anyone had for it in 977. Talking to us, here's what almost nobody realizes when they hear 1 light day for the first time. This isn't the end of anything. It's not a finish line. Voyager 1 doesn't slow down, doesn't stop, doesn't pause to mark the occasion. It keeps moving outward at roughly 38,000 miles an hour, and every single hour that passes it puts another 38,000 miles between itself and this moment, this threshold, this milestone we're about to watch it cross. The 1 light day mark isn't a destination. It's a single frame in a much longer film, a film that has been running continuously since 1977, and will keep running long after the spacecraft itself has gone silent for good. And that silence, unlike the 1 light day milestone, is not a fixed date on the calendar. It's a slow, mathematically certain countdown that has been ticking since the moment Voyager 1 left Earth. Every spacecraft this deep in space needs a power source, and Voyager 1 doesn't have solar panels because sunlight this far from the sun is far too weak to be useful. Instead, it runs on 3 radioisotope thermoelectric generators, essentially containers of decaying plutonium that convert heat from that decay into usable electricity. At launch, those generators produced close to 470 watts of power, enough to run a full suite of scientific instruments simultaneously. Today, nearly half a century later, that number has dropped to somewhere around 250 watts, and it keeps falling by roughly 4 watts every single year. A slow and completely unstoppable erosion, driven by the basic physics of radioactive decay. There is no fixing it, there is no replacing the fuel, there is only managing the decline as carefully and as cleverly as possible. That management has meant hard choices. Of the 10 scientific instruments Voyager 1 originally carried into space, the vast majority have already been powered down, not because they broke, but because there simply wasn't enough electricity left to keep running them alongside everything else the team wanted to preserve. Every single one of those shutdown decisions was permanent. There is no switch to flip back on from 15 billion miles away once a decision has been made and the power has been redirected elsewhere. Each instrument lost is a category of questions about the universe that this particular spacecraft, unique in all of human history, will simply never be able to answer. And yet, even here, in the middle of that slow and irreversible decline, the team at JPL has refused to simply let the clock run out quietly. In 2026, engineers have been testing something internally nicknamed the Big Bang, a coordinated, high-risk restructuring of how power flows through the spacecraft's remaining systems aimed at squeezing extra operational years out of components that are currently running less efficiently than they could be. It's the kind of procedure that would be routine on a spacecraft, you could physically walk up to and fix if something went wrong. Attempted across 16 billion miles with each individual command taking over a day to arrive and confirm it, becomes something closer to a single irreversible gamble, which brings us back to the date itself and to what it actually feels like to sit with the idea properly. Picture the engineers at JPL on the morning of November 18th, 2026. Somewhere in that control room, a number on a screen ticks past a threshold that has never been crossed by anything built by human beings, not by any nation, not by any space agency, not once in the entire recorded history of our species. There will be no dramatic countdown, no fireworks. Likely for most of the world, the day will pass entirely unnoticed, to fold quietly into whatever else is happening in the news that week. But for a small specific group of people, the ones who have spent decades learning to speak a language built for a spacecraft designed before most modern engineering disciplines even existed, that date will represent something almost impossible to put into ordinary words. Proof that something we made, something small and old and running on less power than the average light bulb in your kitchen, has now put an entire day of light speed travel between itself and everyone who has ever loved it, studied it, or depended on its data. Consider for a moment what that number actually means for the people trying to keep the mission alive. Every command they send after November 18th will already be a full calendar day out of date by the time it arrives. Every question they ask the spacecraft is a question sent into yesterday's version of itself, and every answer that comes back is an answer already a full day old before it's even finished traveling. The team is not managing a machine in real time anymore. They are managing a conversation permanently trapped, 2 days behind the present moment, forever, for as long as the spacecraft continues to transmit. And still it transmits, Still, the fin signal makes its impossible journey home, carrying data from a region of space that has never once had a working human instrument inside it before Voyager 1 arrived. Every measurement it sends back after crossing the dark 1 light day mark will be a genuine first. The first data of its kind ever collected from that distance by that spacecraft, using instruments that were never expected to survive this long in the first place. There's a particular kind of vertigo that comes from sitting with just how far 16 billion miles actually is. If you tried to drive that distance in a car traveling at highway speed without ever stopping, it would take you more than 28,000 years. If you scaled the solar system down so that the sun was the size of a basketball, Earth would sit about 30 yards away, a speck barely visible to the naked eye. On that same scale, Voyager 1 right now would already be more than 1.5 miles from that basketball, and by November it will have pushed even further out, deeper into a scaled-down darkness that has almost nothing else in it at all. Space, even within our own solar system, is not full. It's overwhelmingly, almost incomprehensibly empty. And Voyager 1 is currently the single furthest thing our species has ever pushed into that emptiness, while still managing to hear it talk back. That's really what makes the 1 light day milestone worth pausing on more than the raw number itself. It isn't really about distance for its own sake. It's about persistence. It's about a machine that was supposed to go silent. In 1981, built with less computing power than the device in your pocket, that has somehow kept working long enough to still be sending us genuine, unprecedented data from further away than anything human-made has ever been. At the exact moment it crosses a threshold, nobody in 977 seriously expected it to reach at all. B, nobody knows exactly how many more of these milestones are left. The power keeps declining by 4 watts a year, a number so small it sounds almost gentle, almost forgettable, right up until you realize it's a countdown, with no override, ticking steadily toward a moment sometime in the early 2030s, when the last instrument finally falls below the minimum threshold needed to function and the very last signal begins its long, lonely journey home. But that moment hasn't arrived yet. Right now, in the months leading up to November 18th, 2026, Voyager 1 is still out there, still transmitting, still closing in on a threshold that will make it, for the first time in the history of our species, a full day of lightspeed travel away from everyone who has ever been listening. When that date arrives, nothing about the spacecraft itself will change. It won't slow down. It won't celebrate. It will simply keep moving 38,000 miles further out, with every passing hour carrying its faint signal back across a gap that keeps growing wider every single day for as long as there's still enough power left to make the trip worth taking. If you want to know the moment this milestone is confirmed and what it means for everything still riding on this spacecraft's shrinking power supply, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the story of Voyager 1 is not finished yet. And the next chapter is closer than most people realize.